15 years ago, I stopped drinking and taking drugs, and my word, I had absolutely no idea how much that would change how I would see myself. So in today's video, I want to talk about what I've learned about sobriety and identity over the years and what I'm continuing to learn. Hey folks, it's Finn. And this, in his very dignified sleeping pose, is Captain Pip Digby. And if you are new here, then a massive welcome. I make videos about gender transition, chronic illness, mental health, and life as a late diagnosed autistic adult. So if that is something you think you would enjoy, please do consider subscribing. That would be wonderful. And if you've been following for a while, then welcome back, you lovely people. So yes, today let's dive into the topic of sobriety and identity. So I am now 15 years sober, which is just phenomenal. I got sober with the help of AA. And that was in 2010. My sobriety date is the 17th of August 2010. Now I've shared my entire sobriety journey before. I will add links to videos where you can watch all of that. Before I got sober, my life was absolute hell. So of course I hoped that by getting sober my life would improve. But what I really wasn't expecting was just how much of an impact it would have on the person I would become. You know, it's actually kind of ironic now looking back, because the whole reason I started drinking is because I was in so much pain, because I couldn't make life work the way other people did. I couldn't socialise. I was in so much internal pain. And when I discovered alcohol and how it numbed me from the internal pain I was in and how it allowed me to be sociable, I thought I'd found an answer. And it ended up to be the worst decision I'd ever made. But ironically, you know, what alcohol did was then prevent me from actually getting to the bottom of what the problem was, why I was in this internal pain, and why I couldn't socialise. So for years, I just numbed myself and couldn't find these answers. So then by getting sober, getting rid of alcohol, it wasn't just about getting rid of the alcohol, it was actually the doorway to finally discovering the answers for all this and discovering who I am. I'd started drinking at 13, so by the time I stopped drinking at the age of 37, I'd hidden every single part of myself from myself. And getting sober for the first time was terrifying, to meet every part of myself again. And as those of you who follow my journey know, the first thing that came up was my gender. And that was the first thing I discovered in sobriety, was that internal pain that had been going on was gender dysphoria. And my age had caught up with the information that was going on at the time around gender transition, that it was becoming more accessible to learn about gender dysphoria, about gender transition, about accessing gender services. And in being sober now and able to find out this information and relate to transgender people, that was the first thing I realised. And that was an absolute revelation on the one hand, but this huge grief at the other hand, that I'd numbed myself off for years, just not knowing what had been going on. I'd been living as female all those years with that huge pain, and that's what alcohol had been numbing, that gender dysphoria, that really I'd been a man all along. As painful as sobriety was, especially in those early days, to feel all of those emotions that I'd numbed myself for years, to finally understand what was going on, gender dysphoria, and have a solution, gender transition, was just incredible, you know. And to start those early steps, coming out, the social transition, the pronouns, my name is Finn, can you use the pronouns he, him, and have that feeling of, you know, people calling me he, calling me Finn. You know, my first experimentations of that were in the rooms of AA where I felt safe. And I'm so grateful for that. That not only was I getting sober and had this community of people supporting me, these community of people supporting me were also supporting me as I was discovering the reason for my drinking and the solution to my pain to help me to stay sober, which was my transition. So it was the last thing I expected in my sobriety, to be discovering a huge part of my identity that I'd kept hidden from myself. Not on purpose, of course, because I didn't know that's what it was. But I'd masked that part of myself by drinking, because there was just not the information growing up about transgender people. I didn't know why I was in this pain. So yeah, that was the huge gift of sobriety in early days for me, to just go, wow, I'm male. That massive part of my identity, a huge part of the answer to the pain I was in, which was just such a phenomenal gift of sobriety for me. As you know, it's been a bumpy road for me, because I've become chronically ill over the last few years, you know, with hypothyroidism, ME/CFS and POTS and polymyalgia rheumatica. It's been a really tricky road, and it's unsurprising, as I've said many times. You know, I've spent years with huge anxiety. I've spent many years with poor mental health, self-harming behaviours, suicide attempts, really problematic heavy drinking, drug use, a really problematic childhood as well. It's no wonder that I'm a prime candidate for chronic illness, you know. It's actually not that much of a shock. I also inherit some poor health from my mum, you know, so it's not that much of a shock. My sobriety has brought me a gift even with this, because I'm not saying this out of lip service. I really mean this, that even with all of this chronic illness, life is still better now, sober, with all of these chronic illnesses, than it ever was when I was drinking, because life drinking was hell. But what sobriety has given me is this amazing way to handle what's going on. Because living with chronic illnesses is really tough. But I've learned some incredible tools through going through recovery, living one day at a time, learning the power of gratitude to balance things out, where you can say, yes, this is really tough, but actually I've also got this thing which is really good. So it's not about like just being all like, oh, everything's wonderful, it's all fine. It's about being realistic and going, okay, this thing's really rough, but this thing's really good. And sobriety's taught me to be able to do that, so I can be grateful for the things I've got, while still acknowledging that some things are bad. I can practice the power of acceptance really well, because I've learnt that through recovery. Recovery has taught me to really take life on life's terms, which has come in incredibly useful whilst managing chronic illness. Most recently, of course, is discovering that I am autistic. Now, I say discovering, I have probably known since I discovered autistic people in my early teens that I might well be autistic. But it's not that dissimilar to when I first discovered autistic people and I thought I might be autistic, but I can't possibly be because I'm too old. And autism was a bit like that. It's like, surely somebody would have noticed I was autistic. So although I've kind of had my suspicions, I parked them. And it's not been until the last kind of like 4 or 5 years that I've started to really consider it. Anyway, I'm digressing. After being officially diagnosed with autism, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on this and looking back over the years. And I can also see how getting sober has opened up the doorway for this discovery as well. Sobriety is all about living authentically. You know, you take off the mask because you stop drinking and everything is real for the first time. There's no more pretense because you have to really look at yourself and really look at the world. You can't have any pretense because once there is, it's easy to take a drink. And I think that layer of realness, really kind of living in the moment, living real, was the first catalyst in that mask coming down. And I think the way round it happened for me was just gender transition first, because that was the most prevalent thing for me. Was my maleness had to be sorted out because I couldn't live with that pain that was happening. So for me it was maleness first, and then autistic self naturally progressed after that, because this level of falseness I was living that was coming out of a bottle, I was being me through drinking. I was drinking my personality. That was what was happening. I was having a drink and that was how my personality was coming out. And then when I stopped drinking, I was able to be more of myself, which at the beginning I didn't know who I was. And then when I realised that's because I've been trying to be this woman that I wasn't. And then through transition, I started to discover the man who I knew myself to be. But there were still some issues remaining in that. I want to go through this in another video actually, because I think there's some real links with masculinity and my autism that would be quite interesting to talk about. But yeah, I think as I've more softened into myself, that's where my autism has started to come out more as I've masked less and less, which the sobriety first started because I've started to let the more me come out naturally that hasn't been coming out by the use of lager, wine, vodka and stuff. Does this make sense? I think what sobriety also did, which is quite... sounds negative, but it's actually been a positive thing, is it made me more anxious because I coped with my anxiety through drinking, but in sobriety I've got more and more anxious because I haven't got a crutch. But what that's allowed to happen is my autistic traits to come out because I've had no way of holding that in. So over the years my anxiety has got worse and worse and worse despite all the treatments, which has eventually showed us that my anxiety is not anxiety, it's autism. So although that might sound like a negative thing, it's actually a positive thing, because what it's eventually done is gone, wrong diagnosis, you're actually autistic. So yeah, that is actually a good thing, even though it might sound like it's not. It is, because it's ultimately helped me to realise that the reason why all of these anxiety programs you're going through aren't working is because you're using the wrong tools. You're not. You haven't got anxiety disorders. You are autistic, Finlay. So I walked into those rooms of AA and all I wanted was an end to the pain and the madness of that Groundhog Day that was just like, I've got to stop drinking. I'm just making a wreck of my life and my relationships. But I just couldn't. It was like day after day after day. Today I'm going to stop. Oh, I haven't. Okay, I'll try tomorrow. And again and again. And it was just like, oh my God, what is going on? I just wanted an end to that. And my word, I got so much more than I bargained. I got this life that's just contained so many amazingly wonderful things in 15 years. But more than that, I've got access to this wonderful being that I had no idea was underneath all of that layer of pain. Who knew that underneath that was this happy man, and now this autistic man, and I'm feeling so much more free and happy and in touch with myself, and it's just such a revelation. It's taken so long, to get here, but I'm just so grateful to be here. It has not been easy, but I would not have it any other way. These last 15 years have just been the best of my life, getting sober and just discovering all of this about myself. And it's still ongoing, especially now that I've discovered I'm autistic, and I'm now discovering all of these new layers and going back to the beginning of this 15-year journey where I really see that everything started, and re-looking at everything and remaking sense of it all and all of these layers, and like re-putting things together. Me and my counsellor were talking about this and like looking at all these layers and picking them all apart and seeing what affected what. And do you know, it's really funny because when me and Chris moved into this ground floor flat here, just after me and my counsellor were talking about layers and me being a Russian doll, we moved in here, and when we were cleaning out a cupboard, what did we find? A Russian doll. I kid you not. Yep, this was under the cupboard. And like me and Chris couldn't believe it. I had to like message my counsellor straight away and go, look what I've just found in the kitchen cupboard when we moved in. So yeah, and I kept it. It's just because like it represents me, because it is definitely what's gone on over the years. It's like I'm gradually over these last 15 years uncovering one layer at a time to get through to this core authentic me. And that, in a nutshell, I've gone on a bit there, haven't I? That, in a nutshell, is what I see that AA has given me. The ability, sobriety has given me the ability to find the authentic me. And I am so incredibly grateful for that. That was a lot, wasn't it? If you've got this far, thanks for watching. If you're watching this and feeling really lost and you're numbing yourself to cope with life, with feelings and everything in between, I really, really do get it. I've been there and I understand how hard it is. But what I've learned over these years is that you might not know who you are yet, but sobriety can give you a chance to find out. I really hope that helped. Thank you so much for watching and spending time with me today. It really, really means a lot. And if you want to explore more about identity, I will link you to a recent video I made about having the name Finn for 14 years and being on testosterone for 13 years, which I will link here. If you are new and you enjoyed this video, I would love you to subscribe if you want to watch more videos on topics like this, gender identity, chronic illness, being autistic, and you can subscribe here. There's a little thingy in one of the corners. And to those of you that keep coming back, your support over the years means more than I can say. Thank you so very much. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very soon for the next video. Take care. Bye bye.